Ivanka Trump stepped into the studio, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor as cameras swiveled to capture every move. Her tailored white blazer gleamed under the harsh studio lights, a perfect shield for whatever lay ahead. She exuded poise, her signature blend of grace and authority, but beneath the surface, something simmered. Every breath felt heavier than it should have. Each step an act of defiance against the weight pressing down on her chest. Fans watching from home anticipated her every word. She was their icon, their enigma, their untouchable star. Yet tonight, there was an unspoken tension in the air, like static before a storm. The host leaned forward, his tone deceptively casual but laced with intent. "Ivanka," he began, his voice smooth yet probing, "your father made some controversial remarks recently about immigration policy. As someone who has championed women and families throughout your career, how do you reconcile those statements with your own values?" For a moment, Ivanka froze. It wasn't just the question. It was the way it cut through years of carefully constructed walls. She smiled faintly, that practiced curve of her lips masking the turmoil within. "Well," she started, her voice steady at first, "my father is complicated." But even as the words left her mouth, doubt flickered across her face. Complicated didn't begin to cover it. Her next sentence faltered midair, her throat tightened, and her hands instinctively gripped the arms of the chair, knuckles whitening. Tears welled up, unbidden and unstoppable, spilling over onto cheeks meant only for flawless makeup. Viewers gasped collectively, their screens reflecting the shock rippling through living rooms worldwide. I can't," she stammered, choking back a sob. For the first time in years, maybe ever, Ivanka let the mask slip entirely. Her shoulders shook as she fought to regain control. But the facade had cracked wide open. The woman who had always been so composed, so impenetrable, now sat exposed, a fragile human being under the unforgiving glare of fame. Finally, she managed to speak again, her voice trembling but resolute. "You don't understand what it's like," she whispered almost to herself. Then, louder, more forcefully, "to carry this weight. To live with these expectations, to try and be everything to everyone." Her words trailed off, leaving behind a haunting silence. What did she mean by this weight? Was it her father's legacy, her public image, or something deeper, something no one could see? The cryptic admission hung in the air, unanswered but impossible to ignore. Within seconds, social media exploded. Tweets flooded timelines, memes went viral, and hashtags trended globally. Some fans rallied around her, calling her breakdown brave and relatable. Others were merciless, labeling her emotional display as calculated or manipulative. Comment sections became battlegrounds, dissecting every tear, every pause, every cryptic phrase. "Is this real vulnerability or another PR stunt?" one user tweeted. Another replied, "Does it matter? She's still human." The internet buzzed with theories, opinions, and endless speculation, amplifying the intrigue surrounding her sudden unraveling. News outlets scrambled to cover the moment, headlines flashing across screens faster than anyone could keep up. "Ivanka's break down the truth behind the tears," screamed one tabloid. Another read, "What really happened in that interview?" Journalists speculated about family tensions, political fallout, and personal struggles. Analysts debated whether this would mark the end of her public life or the beginning of a new chapter. Fame, once her armor, now seemed like a cage closing in tighter with each passing second. As the interview faded to black, viewers were left with more questions than answers. What had driven Ivanka to this breaking point? What secrets hid behind her polished exterior? And most importantly, what did this weight truly mean? The scene ended not with resolution, but with lingering curiosity, a promise that the story was far from over. Growing up in the Trump household was like living inside a gilded cage, opulent, dazzling, but suffocating. From the moment she could walk, Ivanka had been groomed for greatness. Her father's booming voice echoed through marble halls, demanding excellence and loyalty. "You're a Trump," he'd say, as if those three words carried the weight of destiny. But behind closed doors, there were whispers of favoritism, sibling rivalry, and unspoken expectations that left her yearning for approval while questioning her worth. One memory lingered vividly: a rare, quiet evening when she sat on the edge of her bed at Mar-a-Lago, staring out at the ocean. Her mother walked in, brushing her hair absently. "Your father loves you fiercely," Ivana said softly, almost apologetically. "But love isn't always kind." Those words stayed with Ivanka, shaping how she navigated life under his shadow. By her early 20s, Ivanka had already mastered the art of reinvention. Modeling catapulted her into the spotlight, but it wasn't enough. She craved substance. With determination bordering on obsession, she built her own global brand. Jewelry, clothing, fragrances, all stamped with her name. Success came easily because she refused to let failure exist as an option. At a charity gala years later, a journalist cornered her near the bar. "How do you make it all look so effortless?" he asked, pen poised over his notebook. Ivanka smiled, tilting her head just slightly. "Nothing about success is effortless," she replied coolly. "It's calculated precision mixed with relentless drive." What she didn't mention was the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, or the gnawing fear that one misstep could unravel everything. When she joined her father's administration as a senior advisor, the stakes skyrocketed. Politics wasn't fashion, it was war. Every decision she made was dissected, every word scrutinized. Critics accused her of nepotism, allies praised her ambition, and the media feasted on both narratives. Late one night, Jared found her pacing their penthouse, phone clutched tightly in hand. "They calling me a fraud again," she muttered, scrolling through articles. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Ignore them. You know why you're here." She turned to him, eyes flashing. "Do I? Sometimes I wonder if I'm fighting for something real or just surviving." Behind the polished smiles lay fractures within the family. Don Jr.'s brash confidence clashed with Ivanka's measured approach, while Eric often felt overshadowed by his siblings' achievements. At Thanksgiving dinner one year, tensions boiled over. "You think Dad listens to you more than us?" Don snapped, slamming his wineglass onto the table. Ivanka stiffened, forcing calm into her voice. "I don't play favorites, Don. None of us do." But even as she spoke, guilt prickled at her conscience. Hadn't she stayed silent during arguments where her values conflicted with theirs? Later, alone in the kitchen, she whispered to herself, "Family first, until it costs too much." Jared was her rock, but also her mirror. Their marriage thrived on mutual ambition, yet cracks began to form under the pressure. One evening, after another grueling day of political maneuvering, they argued quietly in their bedroom. "I feel like we're losing ourselves," Jared admitted, running a hand through his hair. Ivanka sighed, sinking onto the bed. "We have to stay strong, for the kids, for our future. But sometimes," her voice broke, "sometimes I hate what this life has done to us." Despite their struggles, they clung to each other, knowing no one else understood the unique chaos of their world. Amidst the noise, one person remained steadfast: Sarah Monroe, a former colleague turned confidant. Over coffee one afternoon, Sarah leaned across the table, her gaze piercing. "Ivanka, stop trying to be everyone's hero. Be you." People respect authenticity more than perfection. Tears welled in Ivanka's eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. "And if being me isn't good enough?" Sarah smiled gently. "Then maybe it's time to redefine what good enough means." The media became a constant antagonist, amplifying every flaw, twisting every statement. Headlines screamed accusations of hypocrisy, privilege, and complicity. Each article chipped away at her armor, leaving her raw and exposed. During a particularly brutal week, Ivanka locked herself in her office, ignoring calls from reporters. Jared knocked softly before entering. "You can't let them win," he urged. She looked up, exhaustion etched into her features. Win what? This game feels rigged. As months passed, the question loomed larger. How long could she sustain this fragile facade? Publicly, she radiated strength. Privately, doubt consumed her. Driving home late one night, rain pelting against the car windows, she gripped the steering wheel tightly. Could she keep pretending to be the woman everyone expected her to be? Or would the weight finally crush her completely? Her phone buzzed. An invitation to appear on live TV. For a fleeting second, she considered declining. Then she remembered retreat wasn't an option, not for a Trump. But deep down she wondered, what happens when the mask falls off entirely? The backlash hit like a tidal wave. Ivanka had championed policies aimed at empowering women and families. But her association with controversial decisions cast a shadow over those efforts. Social media erupted with hashtags like hypocrisy exposed, accusing her of complicity in measures that undermined the very groups she claimed to support. At a press briefing, reporters cornered her. "How do you reconcile supporting these policies while advocating for working mothers?" one asked sharply. Ivanka's smile wavered, though she kept her tone measured. "Change takes time," she replied. "I'm doing what I can within the system." Privately, however, doubt gnawed at her. Was she making a difference, or simply enabling harm? That night, alone in her study, she scrolled through endless criticism online. Each comment felt like a dagger. "She doesn't care about us, just another rich woman pretending to understand struggle." Her chest tightened as guilt mingled with frustration. Had she sacrificed too much for too little impact? As public scrutiny intensified, so did the distance between Ivanka and those outside her inner circle. Old friends stopped returning calls, invitations dwindled until they vanished altogether. At a dinner party hosted by a former colleague, she noticed subtle shifts, awkward silences when she entered a room, hushed conversations halting mid-sentence. One evening, after yet another cancelled lunch date, she confided in Jared. "It's like I've become untouchable," she murmured, staring into her wine glass. He reached for her hand, but his touch offered little comfort. "People are afraid of being associated with controversy," he said gently. "But true friends will stay." Yet deep down, Ivanka wondered if anyone truly understood the weight she carried. Loneliness crept in, an unwelcome companion. Tensions boiled over during a private family meeting at Mar-a-Lago. Ivanka confronted her father about mounting criticisms, urging him to consider the long-term consequences of certain policies. "You're too soft," Donald barked, slamming his fist on the table. "This isn't charity work, Ivanka. Politics is about winning, not pandering." Her jaw clenched, anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Winning means nothing if we lose our integrity," she shot back. "Do you even care about your legacy?" He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Legacy? My legacy is already written in gold. Stop worrying about what others think." Later, pacing the beach alone, Ivanka whispered to herself, "What if my legacy is buried under yours?" At an elegant charity gala weeks later, Ivanka mingled among Manhattan's elite, her smile polished despite the storm brewing inside. As she passed a cluster of guests, a voice hissed behind her. "She's just another puppet." She froze, blood rushing to her ears. Turning slowly, she caught only a glimpse of the speaker disappearing into the crowd. The words lingered, cutting deeper than any headline ever could. Puppet. Not a leader, not a change maker, just a puppet. Back in the car afterward, tears blurred her vision. Was it all for nothing? She choked out, gripping the seatbelt tightly. Jared placed a hand on hers, silent but present. Internal conflict consumed her. One morning, sitting cross-legged on her bed, with papers scattered around her, she scribbled notes furiously. Should she speak out against recent policies or remain loyal to her family? Your silence speaks louder than words, Sarah Monroe warned during a phone call. If you don't stand for something, people will stop believing you stand for anything. But standing meant risking everything. The trust of her father, her place in the administration, perhaps even her marriage. That night, lying beside Jared, she whispered, "What if choosing myself means losing everyone else?" Jared faced his own battles. His political ambitions clashed with his role as Ivanka's husband, creating friction neither could ignore. "We need to focus on our priorities," he urged one evening, frustration edging his voice. "The kids, our future, not this constant chaos." "And what about me?" she countered, tears welling up. "Am I just another priority to manage?" Their arguments grew more frequent, each word a reminder of how far apart they'd drifted. Yet amidst the tension, moments of tenderness surfaced. A shared glance, a quiet apology. Then came the threats. Anonymous messages targeting her children arrived via encrypted apps, chilling her to the core. "Stay out of politics or pay the price," one read. Pacing the kitchen late at night, she clutched her phone, heart pounding. Jared found her there, pale and trembling. "We'll hire extra security," he assured her, pulling her close. But safety measures couldn't erase the fear. For the first time, she questioned whether the cost of fame was worth it. What kind of life was she giving her children? The pressures converged, pushing Ivanka closer to collapse. Late one night, staring at a reflection in the bathroom mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Dark circles framed her eyes. Her once confident posture now slumped with exhaustion. "I can't keep doing this," she whispered, voice breaking. The facade, the perfect image she'd spent years building, was crumbling, and as cracks spread, she realized the truth. Holding it together wasn't strength. Letting go might be. The studio lights burned brighter than ever as Ivanka returned to the same chair where her world had unraveled days before. Cameras rolled, capturing every flicker of emotion on her face. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied them in her lap. This time, there was no mask, just raw vulnerability etched into her features. The host greeted her warmly, though his eyes betrayed a mix of curiosity and caution. "Welcome back," he said gently. "We're honored you've chosen to speak with us again." Ivanka nodded, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the cameras. She wasn't here for them. She was here for herself, for closure. For a moment, silence filled the air. Then Ivanka took a deep breath, her shoulders squaring as if bracing against an invisible storm. "I owe it to myself and to everyone watching. To be honest," she began, her voice steady despite the quiver beneath. Her composure wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Each word carried weight, each pause spoke volumes. She glanced at Jared, seated off camera, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. In that instant, she found her resolve. Not to impress, not to defend, but to reveal. "I've spent my life trying to live up to expectations," she continued, her tone softening. "But tonight, I want to tell the truth. Not theirs, but mine." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Instead, they seemed to fuel her courage. "My father, he's more than a politician. He's a man whose love has always been conditional. His approval isn't given freely, it's earned." Her voice cracked, yet she pressed on. "Growing up, I learned quickly that success wasn't just about achievement. It was about survival. His expectations weren't guidelines, they were commands, and I followed them because— She hesitated, swallowing hard. Because I wanted him to see me, to be proud of me. The admission hung heavy in the air, unfiltered and undeniable. Pausing, Ivanka wiped a tear from her cheek, her expression shifting from pain to clarity. But here's what I've realized, she said, her voice gaining strength. You can't pour from an empty cup. For years, I've poured everything I have into making others happy, my family, my career, this administration. But I forgot one person. Me. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing through the lens. I deserve better. My children deserve better. And maybe it's okay to prioritize ourselves sometimes. The audience sat frozen, captivated by the honesty radiating from her words. Taking another shaky breath, Ivanka addressed the elephant in the room. There are things I regret, she admitted, her voice trembling. Times when I stayed silent when I should have spoken out. Times when I let fear dictate my actions instead of my conscience. Her confession felt like a weight lifting. Not just for her, but for those listening. I'm sorry for those moments, she added softly. And I hope I can earn forgiveness, not just from others, but from myself. As Ivanka finished speaking, the studio erupted in stunned silence. Crew members exchanged wide-eyed glances, while the host struggled to find words. Even seasoned professionals were visibly shaken by the depth of her candor. One camera operator whispered to another, "Did that really just happen?" The collective gasp rippled through the room, mirroring the shock spreading across screens worldwide. No one moved, not even Ivanka, as the gravity of the moment settled over them all. Within seconds, social media exploded. Supporters praised her bravery, calling her confession courageous and humanizing. Critics pounced, accusing her of manipulation or insincerity. Hashtags like Ivanka's truth and too little too late trended simultaneously, reflecting the divided response. Is this real change or damage control? One user tweeted. Another replied, either way, she's owning her story now. The digital chaos amplified the stakes, turning her personal revelation into a global conversation. Finally, without waiting for the host's closing remarks, Ivanka rose from her seat. Her heels clicked softly against the floor as she walked off set, leaving behind not just the interview, but also the burdens of her past. As the door closed behind her, she exhaled, a single, shuddering breath that signaled both an ending and a beginning. In the weeks following her explosive interview, Ivanka made a quiet but decisive choice. She stepped away from public life. The glare of cameras and the roar of headlines faded as she retreated to a secluded home nestled in the countryside. Here, surrounded by rolling hills and whispering trees, she began the slow process of healing. Each morning, she rose early, sipping coffee on the porch while watching the sunrise paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to breathe without the weight of expectations pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just a break, it was a rebirth. Jared joined her in this new chapter, their shared isolation creating space for honest conversations they'd long avoided. One evening, as they strolled hand in hand through the garden, Jared spoke softly. "I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like your struggles didn't matter," he admitted, his voice tinged with regret. Ivanka turned to him, her eyes glistening. "And I'm sorry for pushing you away when I needed you most." They embraced then, not as partners navigating separate ambitions, but as two people rediscovering what it meant to truly support each other. Together, they prioritized their children, filling their days with laughter and simple joys that had once felt out of reach. Public reaction remained divided. Some fans turned their backs, accusing her of betrayal or insincerity. Others rallied behind her, calling her confession brave and relatable. Social media buzzed with debates about authenticity, mental health, and the toll of living under constant scrutiny. Her vulnerability might be exactly what we need right now, one supporter tweeted. Another countered, too little, too late. Yet, amidst the noise, broader conversations emerged about the masks people wear, the pressures of perfection, and the courage it takes to let them fall. To make sense of her journey, Ivanka poured her heart into writing Breaking Free, a memoir that became an instant bestseller. Through its pages, she explored her upbringing, her rise to fame, and the internal battles that nearly broke her. I wrote this book not just for me, but for anyone who's ever felt trapped by their own image, she explained during a rare podcast appearance. Readers connected deeply with her story, finding solace in her honesty and inspiration in her resilience. Writing it gave her closure, a chance to reclaim her voice and rewrite her narrative. With renewed clarity, Ivanka launched a foundation dedicated to empowering women and fostering open dialogue about vulnerability and resilience. At its core was a mission close to her heart, helping others navigate the complexities of ambition, identity, and self-worth. At the Foundation's launch event, she addressed a small crowd of supporters. "We don't have to choose between strength and softness," she said, her voice steady and warm. "Being vulnerable doesn't make us weak, it makes us human." As months passed, Ivanka embraced this new phase of her life with optimism. She no longer sought validation from external sources. Instead, she found fulfillment in meaningful work, cherished relationships, and quiet moments of peace. Driving home one evening, Jared glanced at her profile illuminated by the setting sun. "You seem lighter," he observed. She smiled, a genuine curve of her lips. "I am," she replied. "For the first time, I feel free," and with that she stepped fully into her future. Not as Ivanka, the woman. In the aftermath of her journey, Ivanka's story became a mirror reflecting society's obsession with perfection. For years, she had embodied the polished ideal, a woman who seemed to balance ambition, family, and grace effortlessly. But behind the facade lay cracks, struggles, and doubts that no filter could hide. Her transformation dismantled the myth that success equaled flawlessness. We live in a world that worships image over substance. She mused during a reflective moment, but real strength comes from embracing who we are, flaws and all. Through her vulnerability, Ivanka discovered an unexpected power. By shedding the weight of pretense, she found freedom. Her public confession wasn't just an act of courage. It was a declaration that speaking one's truth, however uncomfortable, is liberating. "Being vulnerable doesn't weaken us, it connects us," she wrote in Breaking Free. This revelation resonated deeply with those who followed her journey, inspiring them to confront their own fears of exposure. One fan reached out via social media. "Your honesty gave me permission to stop hiding. Thank you for showing us that imperfection is beautiful." Ivanka's story urged others to reflect on their own lives. What masks do we wear daily? How often do we silence our true selves to meet expectations? At a quiet dinner with Jared, she posed the question aloud. "Do you think people will ever see me as more than just Ivanka Trump?" He smiled softly, reaching for her hand. "They already do. You've shown them it's okay to be human." Her journey served as a reminder. Redemption isn't about erasing mistakes. It's about having the courage to face them, learn, and grow. And in doing so, perhaps we can inspire others to do the same.